So what are the antidotes to the four horsemen? Now, if you remember, and if you've seen the previous video that I did on the four horsemen, that the fourth horseman is the biggest predictor of people splitting up and divorce. And the fourth horseman is called contempt. So it's very easy, quick antidote for the contempt horseman, right? That's when you're calling each other names, swearing at each other, yelling abusive things towards each other. Maybe there's physical abuse as well. But contempt can go from even making a joke about your partner in front of other people or eye rolling at them. So the antidote for that one is stop. Just don't do it, because it will end your relationship sooner rather than later. Now, the other three, you've got a longer lead time to resolve and to start putting in the antidotes and solutions to it. So let's begin with the first one, and that is called criticism. Now, remember, criticism is anytime you say something to your partner that is global in nature. Like, you always do this, you never do that. Labeling them like, why are you so selfish? Why are you acting like a child? Why can't you be more like this or that? These are too broad and global, and they're only going to lead to defensive reactions. So what's the best way to avoid your partner taking a defensive position? Well, one of the most important things that you need to understand is something called the gentle startup. So as an example, in my previous marriage, I was with my ex-wife for 10 years all up, and there was a lot of arguing and fighting that went into that relationship. We were together from our mid-20s to mid-30s. And I do wish sometimes I knew then what I know now, particularly about John's work. And I remember there were a couple of times where there was an argument, and I remember saying to my ex, maybe you could have said that differently or at a different time. And the retort was, I can't always say it at the right time and in the right way. And I thought, okay, maybe she's right. But having then gone into doing the couples counseling work and having more than 10 years experience working with couples now and trained in John Gottman's methods, I guess I wasn't surprised to see something called the gentle startup, which is literally exactly that. John says that how you raise something and when you raise something with your partner is as important as what you want to raise. And so he came up with something called the gentle startup. Now, the gentle startup, I add something to it, which is the heads up. Before you go into any discussion about anything important, and it doesn't even matter if it's relatively minor, it's better not to drop the bomb on your partner when they're not ready for it, right? Not 10 o'clock at night when you're tired, not just before you leave to go to work, not when you just came home from work, not when the kids are screaming, not when you're out in public. I think it's better to be aware of what's the hill you want to die on, so to speak. So which things are you just need to let go and they're not that big. Like maybe, we were just a bit narky with each other, or a bit tired. And that that's what generated the issue. But when it's something that keeps showing up over and over again in the relationship, or a way of arguing that keeps showing up, then it's important to say to your partner, honey, there's something I want to talk to you about. When's a good time for us to talk about it? Now, they probably want to go, no one wants to hear, we need to talk. Nothing good ever came from that conversation. So you might still need to give them a general sense of what the subject is. So you could say, honey, there's something that's been bothering me about the housework and how we divide things. When can we sit down and have a chat about it? Then the person can say, well, okay, well, maybe tonight, later tonight, or when the kids have gone to bed. And both people have a little bit of mental preparation to talk about the topic, right? So that's really, really important. Never ambush your partner with an important conversation. The second part of the gentle startup is when you sit down, how do you raise it with them to avoid them getting defensive? And that is, you need to raise a complaint instead of a criticism. And a complaint is a specific issue that you raise about your partner's behavior, the impact that it has, and what you would prefer. So you could say, honey, when I go into the kitchen and I see that the dishwasher still hasn't been unpacked, I really feel upset and annoyed and frustrated because we did agree that that was something that you were going to do. And I prefer if you can't do it, or you don't have the time, then just tell me, and then maybe we'll do it together, or we'll figure something else out. Now the person can go, yeah, that's a behavior, I can do that, and so I'm not being attacked as a person, and that helps to avoid the immediate defensive reaction, right? Because the person's not being attacked. You're not walking and saying, you never unpack the dishwasher, you're so lazy and selfish, right? Criticism, criticism, criticism. You're only going to get defensive reaction from that. So that's how you avoid the criticism reaction. Now, how do you avoid getting defensive, right? What's the antidote for the defensive horseman? Well, it's something called self-soothing. And self-soothing is kind of something you do after you start to get a bit upset or frustrated. You might even need to do that during a timeout, which I'll explain. But while you're listening, basically how you avoid being defensive is, let's say you've agreed on a time to sit down and talk about something, and now your partner's raising something and you're starting to get a bit defensive. You have to think of putting yourself in the mental and emotional space of, this person is someone I care about, this is a friend, and I'm curious. I'm going to come at this from curiosity, like, so why do they think this way? Why do they feel this way? Rather than what I think about it and that I need to respond to it. And so you need to be aware that your greatest enemy in terms of defensive reaction is your ego. Your ego is going to be jumping up and down going, that's not true, and that's not what happened, and how dare they say this to me, right? You have to quiet that voice, and you have to almost pretend that they're not talking about you, they're talking about someone else, right? I say to people, put yourself on the shelf just for 5 minutes, and that is part of how you can avoid getting defensive. Part of how we avoid defensiveness is also if we can approach it with a gentle startup. How we begin an argument predicts within 2 minutes 90% how it will end, right? So do it gently and it will end gently. Then what's the antidote for the stonewalling? Well, the stonewalling, if you remember, is someone either shutting down to disengage from the argument, or walking away and going to the pub, going down the road, going for a walk, going to the other side of the house, just getting away from the other person. Now, remember, both strategies, although not good for communication, are good at stopping the escalation of the fight. But in terms of what to do to avoid stonewalling or recover quicker from stonewalling, I recommend that what people do when they do take a time out and they feel like they're engaging in blocking their partner, rather than going through your mind about why your partner was wrong and you were right, try to go through your own game. Try to go through every step and decision that you made throughout the whole argument. And if you can honestly put your hand on your heart and say, right from the beginning all the way through, every decision, every action I took was great and perfect, and I did nothing wrong. Great, good for you. It's unlikely though, right? If you can, at least while you're away from your partner and you might be doing that stonewalling thing, reflect a little bit on, is there anything you could have done differently, said differently, to help not escalate the situation? Because that's going to be part of the discussion that you do when you do something called the aftermath of a fight. And I'll do a separate video on the aftermath. It's quite detailed and probably more helpful to do that directly in sessions if you do want to have sessions with myself, and I'll be running workshops on those topics as well. But I'll do a smaller version just so you understand how to do an aftermath of a fight once you've calmed down, right? You need to be able to calm down. You certainly need to get away from flooding, which is that 100 beats per minute during an argument. You need to go away, calm yourself physically, and then mentally and emotionally try to think through your own game, and if there's anything you can own, because you're going to be using that when you sit down and go through the aftermath. And so that's a brief summary of the antidotes to the 4 Horsemen. Hope you found it helpful, and please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, and I'll see you in the next video.